wanted to do a follow-up, which was more like that first one was really around laying out the basics of business succession. If you are interested in that, we do have a quick little summary slide presentation that we can send out afterwards. You may have gotten it earlier, but just let us know or let me know and I can connect you. I can send over the presentation to you just so that you can see what that first presentation was really all about. So a quick intro about me and my organization. I am with City of Hamilton Economic Development. And what my role is working on helping our immigrants and newcomers start businesses here in Hamilton. One of the things that just kind of got through some of our conversations was looking at business succession, because in Hamilton, we have some amazing businesses that have been kind of in the family for a really long time. And some of these local businesses are thinking about, well, what can I do? How do I either sell my business or how do I retire from my business? What are some of the tactics I need to do? But what if I also want to sell to potentially a newcomer or an immigrant entrepreneur that is really interested in buying my business? So this is where that sort of conversation kind of came about. And I have recruited some amazing experts in these sort of areas. And I wanted to do a quick little introduction of each of them first before we dive into kind of a moderated panel discussion about exactly transitioning your business. So up first, I have Agnes Land. Agnes is the director, wave Agnes. Agnes is the director of business development for Change Connect, which helps organizations grow through change. She's a professional engineer, a Lean Six Sigma black belt professional, and you know it's not karate, and change management practitioner. She and the Change Connect team specialize in sales transformation, business planning, organizational change, and so much more. So Agnes, super excited to have you. Thank you for being here. Up next, we have April Harbottle. April is the managing director of Transition Architects, where they help business owners of small, medium-sized businesses unlock the value of their business so they can transition to retirement or other interests. She's a finance professional with significant experience in banking, corporate lending, mergers and acquisitions, and data information projects. Everybody say hi to April. April, welcome.
Hey, hi.
And last but not least, we have Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a Canadian immigration lawyer who specializes in immigration law and has been practicing since 2005. She's partner at Long Mangalji LLP, whose services include advising and representing companies and employees on obtaining work permits, helping individuals with permanent residency, family sponsorship, representing refugee claims, and helping permanent residents obtain citizenship. So everybody say hi to Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone.
So let's get started. So I have some very targeted questions. So I'm going to direct my very first question to April. April, how much time does it take to prepare my business for sale? And can you walk us through what are some of the first steps that business owners need to think about when they're trying to prepare their business?
Yeah, so the time it takes to prepare will depend on how prepared you are already. So obviously, if you've been keeping good track of your financial situation and the company's performing well already, then it's a quicker process. But the first step to that would be to get an assessment, usually from an outside advisor such as Transition Architects, but to take a look at your company and give you an independent evaluation as to what the company is worth, how a buyer would view your company, what kind of hurdles or risks a buyer might see, but also to let you know if that value would meet your own personal goals if you did end up selling the company. Often we'll come in 2 to 3 years in advance of this owner wanting to sell, and that gives them time to say, okay, I hear your value today. I'm gonna work on my business for a couple more years, and then we'll look at selling it in 2 to 3 years. So big differences, structural changes to the company would take 2 years at least to season on your financial statements so that they qualify. Like if you're reorganizing or doing a restructure, that would take a couple of years. And most of your improvements like process efficiencies or sales, a buyer wants to see a couple of years of quality results before they'll build that into the purchase price.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
really try thinking about it a little bit earlier as opposed to I got to sell tomorrow. Because at the end of the day, just like when you're organizing a garage sale, you don't want to do it the day of. You kind of want to prepare a little bit for it, right, April?
Yeah. Yeah. No, a few years is the ideal time to start looking and at least get that independent assessment up front. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So I want to direct my next question towards Agnes. So along that same line, because we're trying to prep the business for sale or transition. So let's talk about how do you increase the value of the business? So what's that planned runway look like? Oh, you're muted, Agnes.
I just realized I'm muted. Great question, Tammy. So I think with that, there's a few things that may be worth noting. Back to what April was saying, the 1 or 2 year runway is, I think, important. Um, in terms of gathering, we call it gathering the stuff together. And whether that is your financial records, business structure, customer base, your plan moving forward, any systems and process in place, which is the thing that takes the longest, right? But the ability to make your business attractive comes down to number one, whether there is a trend or increasing profit within your organization, whether there is consistent income figures, right? The other thing that they are generally buying is they're buying your customer database. So what is that? Do you have a customer or strong customer database to sell? And I think one thing that's very interesting, especially right now, is the ability to show that you're COVID proof. The ability to show that you're COVID proof allows it to know that, you have a solid business going on here. And it is, I see people buying and selling digital marketing firm, for example, and certain digital marketing firms are tanking and certain digital marketing firms are thriving. But what is the difference when the marketplace is exactly the same, subjected to the same outside pressure? So that really speaks volume to the organization. We also deal with a lot of construction subcontracting companies, and in that they always look for major contract that spans over a couple of years. That's nice to have. I don't think it's a must-have, but it's one that I think is worth discussing.
Oh, excellent. You're right. And I do want to touch on that whole COVID proof point, but we're going to put that in the bank or the parking lot right now, and we'll get back to it in a little bit. But absolutely, a lot of the things that you just said, Agnes, make a ton of sense. We need to really think about what are some of the ways to make our businesses a lot more attractive. And so along that same vein, when we're talking about making businesses attractive, I'd like to direct this to Elizabeth now. What if we wanted to attract international investors to, partner with us or maybe purchase the business from us? What are some of these things that I need to keep in mind in order to sell that business to someone else?
Absolutely. I think for international investors, um, first of all, I mean, just like any other buyers, they're looking at the fundamentals of the business, whether or not it's a good business to purchase or do business with. But beyond that, they have a special certain requirements whereby they need to be able to obtain a work permit or they need to immigrate to Canada. And in doing so, if they are going to need to have a business in Canada to do so, there are certain structural requirements for them to qualify. And if you are going to attract international buyers, it would be good that you understand what those structures may be for particular buyers and that you are flexible in looking at those options for your own business. You need to know where your boundaries are and how much, for example, some businesses, some programs will need the foreign owner to own majority shares of the business. If that is not doable for you, absolutely, that's fine. Then you can have that there, but think of alternatives. For example, if the international investor had their own business, that then one of the activities for the business was to do business with your business. That's a structure that's there. But it's good to understand what immigration laws are so that you can offer these kind of options to international investors.
Oh, amazing. Well, because it's also thinking about international investors also bring a significant amount of experience from either their home countries or they might already have significant experience here in Canada. And so having that opportunity to connect directly with these potential investors is going to be so incredibly important. But also understanding that they're not going to be they're not the same as a domestic investor. So but thinking through some of those like larger sort of terms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of times there are a lot of synergies that can be made with international buyers because they have their whole network of markets that they can access and they have expertise in that way. And sort of sometimes thinking outside the box as to, and the kind of opportunities that you could have with an international investor uh, would is probably very different from what you would have with someone domestically. But on the other hand, there are certain challenges that you have to be able to rise to those challenges to
Yes, yes.
do
Thank
this.
you, Elizabeth. So I wanted to take a pause now because some housekeeping too. We want to make sure that this is like a nice open dialogue between our participants and our panelists. So if you have any questions, start to drop them into the chat box and I will I don't know if my internet is stable or not. It keeps popping up telling me that it's unstable. So hopefully you're not seeing me pause in a very unflattering way. But anyway, please drop any of the questions that you might have into the chat. I've got the chat window open, so we can definitely take advantage of these experts at this very moment. So we will also spend a little bit of time at the very end to actually have like an open forum so we can actually, you can ask lots of questions at that time and continue, and then hopefully get all of the right information that you're looking for. So along the same tact as what Elizabeth's been talking about, she's talking about it from how do we set up the business for an international buyer, but getting back to the roots of building your business and making sure that there is a lot of amazing qualities for your business. I'd like to pass this back to Agnes and ask her, how do you put that predictability into your business that makes this really attractive to buyers? Like what are some of those factors that we need to think about?
Fantastic. Great question. So a lot of times when we walk into any client site and we work with them on this transition plan, you are talking about, like April says, 3 years out, at least 1 or 2 years out. Because if a business that's right for you that you have in your mind and you can predict may or may not be something that is black and white on paper that someone else can see your vision. So I always um, you know sort of draw the synergy of someone looking at a piece of land. I have a construction background. So if you look at a piece of land, some people can see sky rise and other people see a dirt. So you gotta, the idea of, maybe sometimes hiring a broker or hiring April is the ability to make them see your vision, right? And the idea of predictability comes from, things that we do when we walk into a client site, in terms of putting systems in place, putting strategy in place, the ability for things not to fall on just the owner's shoulder, right?
Mhm.
The ability to allow the business to run without you, right? That is very important. Your buyer, your prospective buyer, can't be buying you. The buyer has to buy your business, and the ability to do so, like what I mentioned before, the ability to show profit increase, the ability to show that you have a consistent strategy, the consistency, like especially in sales, something that we really work on is the consistency in sales and how you show that growth. And how do you strategically go about expanding different market? Is let's say you're doing a market expansion, is that repeatable from market to market? I'm working with a small business right now where their main target audience is in Ontario, and a
Mhm.
US giant wants to buy them. And one of the things that we're hustling to do this year is go cross country. So where
Mhm.
can we pick up? We just went to Saskatchewan this month, right? Can we pick up Manitoba? Can we pick up Yukon? Can we pick up, across the board? Where can we pick up so that we are a bit more attractive to the US buyer? So there's quite the idea of showing repeatable process that's independent of the owner is key to making your business attractive.
Excellent. So with that, I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper and trying to understand, like, perhaps the landscape of all of this. So those are some of the aspects that an owner can directly control, thinking about sales predictability, thinking about expansion, thinking about taking the owner or the original owner outside of the business. But then maybe on a landscape perspective and the environment, April, I wonder if you could share with us, what do you think about this past year's lockdown and how has it really affected the merger and acquisition space and the sales space? What does it look like today?
Yeah, it's made a big change, obviously, for lots of reasons. In some ways, good, surprisingly, but lots of ways not so good. The first 6 months were very nerve-wracking as everybody was kind of wondering, if the world was going to stop spinning, kind of thing. So deals just kind of stopped and crumbled in a couple of places. The banks retracted quite a bit for the first half. And that ended up being quite a challenge. I had 2 deals fall apart because changes in banking at the very last minute in the approvals. So that was a challenge. I have a lot of contacts with the big banks and the Schedule Bs as well. So I've been testing that now and had a couple good conversations at senior levels to see where the banks are as far as future lending, and they are opening up. They're opening up in very specific quality industries that they consider lower risk and very strong covenants behind them. So they're certainly open for business, but they're a little tighter than they were a year ago. So the financing piece, there's still, believe it or not, a lot of buyers out there. I am getting calls daily from buyers, and I have a very large database now of 500 buyers probably in that database, looking for certain industries that either they think are high growth or they already are in that industry and they'd like to add. We call them a roll up. So you take a smaller business and roll it into a larger one. I've got a number of deals right now where it's a larger company looking to buy one of the smaller ones. So there's the banking was affected. Certainly the buyers, there's a lot of money out there, but it tends to be in the bigger players. It's not, just at mom and pops don't have the money, but there's a lot of private equity groups or family trusts that are out looking for opportunities because they're not really getting much of a return in the market anymore. So they've found that, private business is a good opportunity to get a better return on their investment. So the companies that have done well through COVID, I'm saying it's the best stress test ever.
Yes,
truly.
absolutely.
So there's one of the positives is that if you've survived at all through COVID, but especially if you've done well through COVID, that greatly reduces the risk for the buyer because they realize that you're either an essential service or in a growing industry that has surprisingly kind of shone through a very, very tough situation. And I can speak to that specifically because I'm part of an M&A group across Canada, and we share knowledge and what's happening in the market, and certain industries are doing very well. Like certainly the trades, they're essential to running your house. Like if you have like I just was on the phone with one of my clients that has an HVAC business. I mean, you know what? We still have to heat our homes, right?
And it's winter time, so we do
and
definitely
it's winter,
need
and he's very busy and has done well through COVID. So the trade industries are still really key. I just think it's worthwhile hearing some of the industries that people are really paying attention to, like bigger buyers are focusing on food production and agriculture, distribution, personal care products, healthcare.
Yep.
security in all forms, including cybersecurity, but personal security, home security, all of that as well. Senior services,
Mhm.
obviously, and then a new term, which was new to me anyway, but everybody will get it when I say it, cocooning services.
Oh yeah, stay at
So
home, kind of like,
finding
yeah.
services to beautify your home or to make it more enjoyable, because we're spending a lot more time in our home these days. And we've all heard the stories of, you can't get a pool installed for 2 or 3 years now because they're sold out. Lumber went through the roof because everybody fixed their decks and their fencing over the last summer.
Mhm.
So all of those areas that cater to home beautification are actually surprisingly doing very well and are very attractive and are areas of focus for the big players are looking to buy into those spaces in a big way.
I know that my dog is loving the fact that I'm at home. And
Yeah.
so, like, I wonder if pet services is also on that list, you know? So,
It would be. I think it's probably a byproduct of cocooning kind of thing. So there's lots of different facets that would roll into that. But so surprisingly, despite everything, there's been some really positives that have come out of it. And the companies that are still doing well, or at least even moderately well, like, I mean, everybody expects, the results are not the same as, the last couple of years, but they've done well and they're essential, will still have buyers out there. One thing I did
so
want to speak to about how much time it takes to prepare. I talked about the preparation, but the other thing to consider is that it does take a fair bit of time to find the right buyer.
yeah.
So even when you get to the point that your company's running very well and you're happy with the numbers and you've got good backup staff and all of the positioning, it can take easily a year, sometimes longer, to find the right buyer. Using someone like myself who has a wide range of buyer prospects out there already does usually help, but it still takes time. Yeah, it takes a fair bit of time.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
so this totally all melds together because
yeah,
Agnes is talking about setting up the business, ensuring sales predictability, ensuring that you've got a lot of the policies and processes in place. But
yeah.
we just got a question from Desmond. And Desmond, I think that this question is absolutely spot on. Elizabeth, are there certain industries or types of businesses that appeal more to immigrant investors? Is there anything a business can do in advance to make their business more attractive to a foreign or immigrant buyer? Or is it exactly the same as a domestic potential buyer? So I think let's start with Elizabeth, but I feel that all three of our panelists can also weigh in on this particular question. So
Yeah,
Elizabeth?
absolutely. Those are great questions. Are there any certain industries or type of businesses? For the most part, my clients normally, to start off with, they may not be looking at huge businesses. In fact, for them, SMEs, where they're not, uh, because they may have the capital to do so, but in the beginning, just to test the market, not want to go really big. And so they're looking for small businesses to purchase for a lot of times. And businesses that, like April and Agnes have talked about, that have stood the test of time, stood stresses. You can really show on the books that the value that you're asking for can be justified. That certainly is something that is there. And like I said, though, for foreign buyers, what they're really looking for as well is ways for them to be able to work in Canada, be able to immigrate, be able to work, because if they can't come to Canada, they can't really run the business. So understanding the immigration options for them and structuring the deal that way certainly would help.
Actually, I have something to add to that, just to piggyback on what Elizabeth was saying, and perhaps it's my circle. Um, I'm finding that a lot of immigrants that are interested in coming here tend to have professional services background. So whether that is an engineering background or um, running a clinic background, something along that line where they want to leverage their professional background, and they want to buy up another, let's say, mechanical engineering firm here that allows them to continue their trades. I find those to be really good strategic fit also for the buyer, but also for the seller. For leaving a legacy. For example, I have clients where they are they're retiring, and we'll talk a little bit about why do the transition. But he's retiring, and he can easily get gobbled up by a U.S. firm and roll up, like April was talking about. But he doesn't want to. He wants to leave a legacy. So he's looking for a strategic buyer where someone that's technical that can take over the firm in a way that allows it to operate. Similar to the way that it's being operated now, and grow and really move forward with advancing science. So, they're willing to take a little less valuation, understanding that their legacy will live on. So I find it's, as we talk about valuation, as we talk about all that predictability, all that wonderful jazz, which is essential to every purchase. Sometimes you really got to think about the motive for selling as well. That would really help, to April's point, find the right buyer, and make it a perfect fit.
That's very interesting, Agnes. I think that's really good. I think a lot of times the foreign buyers, they may be professionals, and they would be they would be happy to take over a business that is aligned to their background. And in fact, when I advise clients, you tell them, don't just go and say, oh, I'm going to run a restaurant. You have no restaurant experience. Do something that plays to your strengths and background, because it's important for immigration. It's important on a business wise. And I think it's really important, when you want to sell to a foreign buyer, that you are going to offer to train them, to pass along your business contacts, etc., because that's something that they, coming from a new country, wouldn't have. And so that is of great value if you were able to stay on for a little while afterwards to help transition your business to them.
Yeah, touching on that, almost all the deals that I end up putting together, the owner sticks around for at least a year. And often up to 3, where and sometimes on a reducing basis, but the buyers want that year to transition knowledge and all the contacts, and then just make sure that there's no surprises when they take over on their own. So lots of times it's 1 year, and then maybe half time, and reducing as time goes forward.
Yeah. Excellent. So we did get a question from Yvonne, but I'm going to ask that in a little bit, because I do want to kind of narrow in on something that Elizabeth had said a little bit earlier, which was that trying to keep, if you're going to keep an international buyer, they need to figure out how to work here. Like, they actually have to be here to work. So I was wondering, are there any investment programs in Canada where an international investor can invest in a company, and then maybe they can obtain permanent residency and they can be here?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear is people think, oh, they can sort of just buy their way into Canada and just passively invest in a business, and they say, how much is it for me to immigrate? And my answer is, you can't just buy your way in. There used to be different programs before, but not in Ontario. And in order to really immigrate as an entrepreneur, they can. But there are various ways to do so, and it is about active participation, active management of the business, because they're coming in based on their ability to manage the business. Now, that being said, if you needed someone to invest in your business, it's not necessary for them to manage your business. How we can structure it is that they create their own business and they are going to manage, and as part of the business of their own business, they do business with you. That is a possibility as well. So certainly, but it's not straightforward that yes, you give me $1 million and you're going to immigrate. You give me, 200,000. It's not that easy. Okay. So, yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, so when you're talking to international people, you can't buy your way into Canada. You got to work for it. That's what it is. You got to work for it. So let's go to Yvonne's question. She says, do you think there are any differences in consideration for women versus male business owners in the succession journey? So I'm going to open that up to everybody. So if they can, this is a pretty big topic too.
Mm-hmm.
Women business owners versus male business owners. Like what does that look like? What are there any other considerations we need to think about?
Well, it's interesting because we have a panel of all women here.
Oh, yeah.
And we're all business owners. So that's a really interesting question. For me, I think in terms of immigration, there is no overt rule, for women or men. I find that a lot of times, I think it's all about, oftentimes I have clients who come to me and a lot of times it's almost by default that they think the men are going to be like the principal applicants, but oftentimes the women are much stronger applicants than the men, right? They have the English, they have the education, they have the they're younger, and youth is actually very, very important as well. So I think sometimes it's through certain kind of lenses that it's almost thinking, oh, it's, the men are the ones who are the business owners and they're going to be the principal applicants. But in honesty, a lot of times the women can be more qualified to immigrate than their couple. I mean, it varies, but it's all about the background. It's all about their own work experience.
Yeah. I'll expand a little bit on that. Just, right now, I mean, I do all kinds of transition advisory work, but a great deal of the work that I do is with mature business owners and typically in more traditional businesses. Like I said, I'm dealing with trades, so it has tended to be more men, but that does not matter. I mean, it depends on if it's a business that requires someone to have skills directly in the business or to be a manager of the business. I do talk from a succession standpoint, family period, not just male or female, but I mean, it's when I do the assessment, I look at all the options to transition. So one of them is selling the business. One of them is doing succession, which could, someone in your family, could be even nieces or nephews or someone like that. I look at management buyouts. I look at bringing partners in as well. So we look at all succession options. That's why my company is called Transition Architects, because it's not always easy or even possible just to do a flat out, just sell 100%. We have to look at all the options. But from a succession standpoint, we need to evaluate who potentially is coming in as the successor, and do they have the skills? And I tell a little bit of a story where I have an HVAC client that I've worked with for a year or so, and his son was working directly in the business for a couple of years and had great skills in the trade, but he did not have management skills. He was not able to be working all the time on the weekend. Like, the owner was available for emergencies all the time. His son didn't want to do that kind of thing. He liked working kind of in a 9-to-5 job, and that was it. So even though he was open to, he would have liked to have had the business basically given to him or transitioned over somehow, he couldn't, he didn't have the skills to run it at kind of the management level as well. So what we have done as part of our consideration is look at bringing in a partner to buy maybe 80% of the business, and then the son they will provide the management oversight. The son can still do the operational piece and still be a successor and keep that legacy going in a different way. But looking at options and skill sets are really important for the successor, male or female. And this scenario is a win-win for everyone involved.
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah,
then when we're thinking about putting that out there,
yeah.
we're putting this whole, I want to transition my business, sale, could be franchising, could be everything. So does our online presence matter? Maybe Agnes, maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
I think online in today's day and age, online presence always matters. Um, it doesn't matter whether you're selling a product or whether you're selling your business. People before they come to a meeting will creep you. Like if you think otherwise, I think you're delusional. So, and I think it's important. It speaks to a brand, right? It speaks to your brand. It speaks to you know, your online presence is going to be part of what you're trying to sell to the buyer. So, and building up that presence, building not, I mean, I'm not blindly just chasing after follower for the sake of chasing after follower, but there's got to be a brand present in a way that allows people to understand what they're buying. It's hard for someone to attach to a company. It's better for a person to be attached to a persona, to
Mm.
what we call an avatar. So, and your avatar of the brand should speak to your mission and your vision of your organization. And then the right buyer would come based on what you put out there, because at the end of the day, they have to be inheriting the culture, at least for the next little bit. So they got to understand what it is about. And yeah, online presence matters a whole lot. Regardless of whether you're an HVAC company or whether you are a trendy sneaker brand, right? All range still matters.
So that makes a ton of sense. I mean, look at us. We're on Zoom and we're doing this like webinar on online. But a question for all of you then is that as we're kind of wrapping up this webinar, what are some of the resources that you'd like to share with our audience that are available so that they can learn more about this business sale or business transaction? So let's start with April. What are some resources that you can share with us and our audience about
Yeah.
this particular topic?
So I've created a number of resources on my website. They're easy to find, and actually the tab says resources. So within it, I've got like a transition readiness checklist is one thing for people to go in and see if they've kind of met the boxes as far as preparing. I've even built a small, very simplified valuation calculator to put in, people can put in their historical profitability, and you make an adjustment for how much has been taken out personally, and like over and above what somebody else, a normal operator would be charged. And then I do a calculation, so it gives you a feel right up front for what the value would be. I also have a section on tips and kind of best practices. So I've put the top 10 tips to think about before you sell your business, and they're all on there. And then I'm also doing a blog now. So if anybody, I'm at least once a month, I'm putting some kind of an update from my learnings, and often they're stories. There's stories of succession challenges and how we were able to get through them and find a happy resolution. Usually happy, not always, but and that's something that to be discussed too, because it's good to know that up front. If it's going to be very difficult to sell a business, it's good to know up front. But the blog has a lot of interesting stuff. I'm currently writing a new blog, which will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, about why deals don't close.
Mm.
And as I'm writing down stories of situations that I've dealt with over the years and what didn't close, the biggest theme often is it's almost it's emotional, believe it or not.
Yeah.
We all can work with numbers, but there's an emotion there's a very strong emotion attached to an owner run business. People are very connected to it. They have to really figure out and get comfortable and be prepared to detach themselves from that business, and that doesn't happen overnight. Like it takes some time to really adjust to that. So the psychology, and then understanding once you've had these assessments done up front to really manage your expectations. So if you have reasonable expectations, then you're more likely to attract a buyer. So
Excellent.
yeah, and those are all kind of the key messaging coming out. So that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and I think it'll be worth reading. So that's one resource, is to go to my website or get on the mailing list, and you'll see any new information coming out.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Agnes, have you got any great resources that you'd like to share with our participants?
Sure. So we definitely, one of the things that we find with helping with any transition is that, you know, a lot of our owners are walking in blind. They actually don't know what is an M&A process. So like we educate you guys on how to do a sales process or marketing process or PM process together, put together. We actually have an M&A process paper that I can share. So I'll share that through Tenny. That is interesting because you do need to get yourself educated on the steps involved, because it's not all just, you know, everyone is huge on the idea of just valuation, but that's not the all that ends all. So that's, I can share that definitely. The other thing also is we do also have a transition readiness checklist. So I'll also forward that along to Tammy, and then you guys can also get a hold of that. But I think the best way is actually if you guys can link me on LinkedIn. I'm an open book. Just type your questions and then I'll do my best to answer for you in real time there.
Excellent. Thank you, Agnes. And Elizabeth, you've got like a lot of amazing resources. So what are some things that you might want to share with our participants?
Sure. I mean, so we've done some videos for entrepreneurs and skilled workers on, you know, how to immigrate to Canada, and that's on our website lmlawgroup.com/videos. We also have a COVID page on our website as well, where you can see some of the new updates on COVID. There's so many things that are constantly changing in this environment because of COVID and the border rules. And, you know, there was just some new announcements a few days ago. Now you have to stay in a government hotel for 3 days when you come, etc. So a lot of new things every single day. It seems like something's coming out, and we try to update some of that. But you know, similar to what Agnes is saying, a lot of this whole process for immigration, it has to be specific planning, it has to be individualized planning. Oftentimes I'll have people email me and say, how much is it to immigrate to Canada? And I say, well, that's kind of like you going to a restaurant and you asking them how much is dinner. You know, you can't really tell somebody how much if you don't really know what exactly they need to do to immigrate. So what we like to do is we like to sit down with someone for around an hour or so. It could be longer, and just to hash out a plan as to what you need to do to go forward, whether or not you want to buy a business in Canada or if you want to work with someone overseas and sell your business. It's important to have that planning and then move forward from there. So I'm happy to speak with you guys. I'm going to type my email on the chat box as well. That's the best way to get a hold of me. It's elon@lmlawgroup.com.
Well, I actually had prepared a slide that shows this.
Oh, perfect.
So you guys can see.
And I will send you guys out these slides as well for you guys who've registered. We'll send it off to you guys.
And so we're coming up at 12:49, and honestly, this is amazing. My panelists have done such a fantastic job of answering all the questions in a very comprehensive and succinct way. So we're at a 10-minute sort of break here to turn it around and ask our participants and say, is there any questions that you guys have? Burning desire kind of questions about business succession or sale and transition of your business, please drop them into the chat, and that's something that we can have some of our panelists answer right away. If not, I will stop my sharing. Wait, how do I stop? Stop sharing. And I have other questions to ask. So when it comes to buying and selling a business, what are some of the other opportunities? Like, what are some of the other ways to potentially transition this business? So I feel like the buy sell is like kind of like the most notable one. So April, are there other types of like ways to transition a business? Like, what are some of the other
Yeah.
methods?
Um, so yeah, I did touch on it a little bit, but I'll expand, is that especially for smaller businesses, I mean, it's not always easy to just do an immediate sale of the business because there is often quite a bit of owner dependency. So bringing a partner in is a good option, especially, you know, we can structure it so there's a reducing buyout. So you're basically, you might get a chunk of your money up front and then get it paid the balance over a few years, which would reduce your involvement. The other thing is like looking at people close to you, which is, again, succession is an option, but management is another option. So that would be like a management buyout potentially. Another one is hire your buyer strategy. So some of the smaller businesses that are very dependent on that owner, like they can't leave it without someone who's there to operate it. So to bring someone in, and again, you need lots of lead time on this, but to train them and get them to slowly pay you out from the future earnings of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of a chiropractor or naturopath, something like that, where it's professional services. And if they can bring someone young in from out of school, take the time to train them, and then basically their percentage would come down from 100% to 90 to 80, and while they're getting paid out by the business. So the other person would be working more, using their energy to pay out the retiring partner, but it takes a bit of time. So hire your buyer is a very interesting strategy as well.
Yeah, because that kind of like piggybacks into my next question, which was something that Agnes had brought up early on in our conversation. And it was about like imagining how your business could be run without you. Because
Mm-hmm.
as business owners, we put a lot of time, love, blood, sweat, tears into our business. And like just the thought of like leaving the business is really hard. So, Agnes, can you provide a little more like sort of thought process around like what does it mean by having this business run without me?
Yeah, no, for sure. There are days that I think about that. Like, how can this business run without me? And I think honestly, a lot of owners are a lot more sophisticated around that process nowadays, like more than ever. The idea of succession planning, really finding their next successor, not only, back to April, not only just for the HVAC operations trade, but also on the leadership side. And how is this person going to, hopefully, generally as an owner, you're hoping to find a next a successor that's going to, you know, take it to the next, your business to the next level, right?
Mhm.
So putting a lot of process in place, I think it's key. Honestly, not only does it stabilizes the business for the buyer, it also makes sure and enhance the worth of your business and allows the buyer to build on solid foundation, right? So when you think about buying the business without you, there's a lot of operations efficiency that has to be had. A lot of the bottlenecks have to be worked out. I think that's key. Then the other thing I always say is find predictability and scalability within the sales process. So, a lot of times when we work with SaaS startup, if you're able to work out where the kinks are in the sales process, and you realize, okay, each salesperson you bring in, and each inside salesperson you bring in equate to $1 million, and each account executive you bring in equates to $2 million, and the ability to bring these headcounts in allows you to grow exponentially. Then your business is scalable.
Mhm.
And to do that, in the sales side, for example, it is by following a sales playbook. What is a sales playbook? What a repeatable process? If people are, I mean, a lot of times, and which is you'll find in our checklist. So if you're still finding a lot of people doing very manual work within the organization, that's probably a bottleneck, because there's so many automation technology, enablement and technology that really can be put in place to make sure that forget about just growing, right? But also optimizing your bottom line. When you're talking buy and sell, EBITDA is important. So what does that look like, and how do you get ahead of it before the buyer comes in? Because when we talk about valuation and whether that will bring valuation down, a lot of manual work would, and a lot of manual work also won't allow your organization to be scalable with you or without you. So it is the thought process of putting all those in place.
Excellent. Like that's not just for scale, that's not just for transitioning your business, that's about scaling the business too, right? So this is absolutely twofold. So I have a question from Bruce. April, what areas of the business does your assessment look at, and what areas do you see as key to valuing the business? So if you identify any concerns, will you bring these to the attention of the owner and offer possible solutions?
Yes, for sure, to the second. And then as far as the assessment, typically we would start with, I would look at 5 years financial statements. So I would do a very in-depth financial analysis. So I would look at the historical sales, profitability, margins, owner draws, all of those we would look at to determine the normalized EBITDA is the number that we use in the M&A world. So we normalize the EBITDA and working capital and all that kind of thing, and come up with a valuation, which is from a buyer perspective. So there's different ways to value a company. To go to a CBV, they value it more from a different type of estate planning or ongoing. A buyer is really focused on the EBITDA of the company. So I will come in and do that kind of assessment up front. And through that, once you normalize the EBITDA, you apply a multiple factor to that. And the multiple will be dependent on the industry, the risk, lots of subjective factors. So there's a little bit of art brought into it, not just the science. I mean, we can work numbers, but knowing what buyers are looking for will, because I have that experience and I'm talking to them every day, I know if it should trade at 3 times the multiple, or maybe it's a 2 times multiple or 4. Really, it's in that range generally, but that's where we would go with it. So once we come up with a number, then I can discuss that with the owner and talk to them. If they're satisfied with that number, then there's not a lot more to do. We will look at the different options to potentially transition, and if they have somebody in-house that they could sell to, or a succession situation or an MBO, or we can talk about a partner if they're ready to go to market with the existing valuation. If not, then I would very often refer them to someone like Agnes to help them improve the value of the company. So I would identify, if it's worth $1 million and you really need 2 million before you're ready to retire, then you need to go through a process to enhance the value. And someone with Agnes and her team would be able to, help them for those couple of years to bring it to the next level and then improve their valuation, but also the attractiveness to buyers. So I'm really coming in as almost a buyer surrogate kind of thing, or an independent assessment to show them how a buyer would view their company and what would be the risks. And I mean, buyers want to buy business, but they also want to minimize risk. So a lot of factors play into that. And part of it is the price. The more money they spend, the more risk they feel they have, obviously, and their returns are less. So we have to balance all of that, and as well as industry and company and management criteria that all factor into that assessment.
Thank you, April. We're coming up at 1 o'clock and I'm very cognizant of time. So as our participants have heard, when you're prepping to get your business ready to go, you want to talk to Agnes and the Change Connect crew. When you're ready to when your business is already scaling, sales predictability, all of that, and got all your ducks in a row, you want to talk to April. April's going to help you with some of that valuation and start to get you on the right path to buyers. Now, if you're interested in selling the business to international, this is where you want to bring in Elizabeth and her crew at Long Mangalgi.
And we all work together too, right? So Obviously, if I have an opportunity for Agnes, I'm not going to do the scaling, but she's great at that. Or if I have a company that would be really attractive to an international buyer, I will be calling Elizabeth because she's the pipeline for all of that, for sure.
For sure. I mean, we've all worked together before, and that's why we're all here as a group. And thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Really appreciate your questions, and looking forward to touching base with you guys.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.